The dust hadn't settled yet. Sergeant Marcus Chen stood at the edge of what used to be Al-Rashid Elementary School, watching smoke curl from the collapsed eastern wing. The air tasted like burnt metal and concrete. 3 days since the shelling stopped. 3 days since the evacuation order came through. 3 days since anyone should have been alive inside those ruins. But something moved in the rubble. Marcus squinted against the morning glare, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle slung across his chest. The movement came again, low to the ground, deliberate. Not the random shift of unstable debris. Something with purpose. A dog emerged from a gap in the shattered wall. The animal was medium-sized, maybe a shepherd mix, its tan coat grey with dust. It moved with a strange precision through the wreckage, placing each paw carefully, testing weight before committing. Marcus had seen enough combat dogs to recognize training when he saw it. But this one wore no vest, no identification tags that caught the light. The dog stopped at the edge of a concrete slab. It looked directly at Marcus, and something in that gaze made his breath catch. Not the vacant stare of a feral animal, not the desperate hunger of an abandoned pet. This was something else, something that looked like calculation, like purpose. Then the dog turned and disappeared back into the building. "Chen, you seeing this?" Corporal Davies materialized beside him, binoculars raised. The younger soldier's voice carried an edge Marcus didn't like. "Yeah, stray probably. Strays don't go back into bombed-out buildings." Davies lowered the binoculars. "They run from them." Marcus said nothing, because Davies was right. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong here. Animals fled disaster zones. They didn't investigate them. They didn't move with purpose through collapsed schools that could crumble further at any moment. They didn't look at you like they needed you to understand something. "Command's orders were clear," Davies continued. "This sector's cleared. No signs of life. We move to the next grid in 40 minutes. Marcus kept his eyes on the gap in the wall where the dog had vanished. The sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the devastation. Somewhere in the distance, a generator coughed to life, the sounds of a city trying to remember how to breathe. But inside that school there was only silence. Wrong, suffocating silence. "I'm going in," Marcus heard himself say. Davies grabbed his arm. "Negative. Structural integrity is compromised. Engineers haven't cleared it." "Then why is that dog still alive?" The question hung between them. Davies released his grip, his jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. Finally, "Give me 15 minutes. I'll request a K9 unit. Get them to—" "In 15 minutes, we're moving to the next grid." "Chen!" But Marcus was already moving toward the school, his boots crunching over broken glass and shattered tile. The building loomed before him, its facade peppered with shrapnel scars, windows like empty eye sockets. The main entrance had collapsed entirely, a mountain of concrete and rebar that would take a crew days to clear. He headed for the gap the dog had used. Up close, the damage was even worse. Walls had pancaked onto each other, creating unstable voids that could collapse with a strong breeze. The smell hit him, plaster dust, scorched paint, and underneath it all something organic, something that made his stomach turn. Marcus clicked on his helmet light and stepped inside. The beam cut through darkness thick as smoke. He was in what used to be a hallway, the ceiling buckled but intact, classroom doors hanging from broken hinges. Children's artwork still clung to one wall, bright crayon drawings of families and houses and sons with smiling faces, all of it coated in grey ash. A sound echoed from deeper inside the building, a soft scraping like claws on tile. Marcus followed it, his light sweeping side to side, picking out details that felt wrong. A backpack crushed under a fallen beam, its cartoon character face frozen mid-laugh. A water fountain twisted into modern art. A shoe, small, meant for a child, sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the hallway, just sitting there waiting. The scraping grew louder. Marcus entered what had been the main corridor, a long stretch that connected the school's 2 wings. Emergency lighting flickered somewhere ahead, casting strobing shadows that made the wall seem to breathe. The dog sat in the middle of the corridor, illuminated by the stuttering light. It was holding something in its mouth. Marcus's training kicked in. Assess the threat, identify the object, determine intent. But his training had never covered this, had never prepared him for the way the dog's eyes reflected his helmet light, twin coins of green fire in the darkness, had never explained why every hair on his neck stood at attention. "Easy," Marcus whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the dog or himself. The animal didn't move, just sat there waiting. Marcus took a step forward, then another. The dog remained perfectly still, its tail flat against the floor, its body language speaking a language Marcus couldn't quite translate. He was 3 meters away when he realized what the dog was carrying. A stuffed animal. A rabbit, once white, now stained with dust and something darker. One of its button eyes was missing. The other stared up at Marcus with an accusation he couldn't name. "Where did you find that?" His voice sounded strange in the empty corridor, too loud and too small at the same time. The dog stood, the rabbit still clamped gently in its jaws. It turned and began walking deeper into the building, toward the collapsed eastern wing where the damage was worst, where the engineers had marked entire sections as critical risk, where no one should go. Marcus's radio crackled. "Chen, we have movement on thermal. Something's wrong with the signatures. You need to get out of there now." But Marcus was already following the dog into the darkness, his light carving a tunnel through air that felt too thick, too close. Behind him, the distance back to daylight seemed to stretch and warp. Ahead, the dog moved with that same careful precision, placing each paw with deliberate intent, like it was following a path only it could see. The corridor ended at a stairwell. The dog descended without hesitation, disappearing into shadows that swallowed Marcus's light. He paused at the threshold, one hand on the railing that was slick with something he didn't want to identify. Every rational thought screamed at him to turn back, to report this to command, to let proper teams with proper equipment handle whatever was down there in the basement of a destroyed school. But rational thoughts didn't explain the rabbit, didn't explain why a dog would risk its life returning again and again to a place that could become its tomb, didn't explain the sound Marcus heard now, filtering up from the darkness below. A sound so faint he almost missed it, so impossible he almost didn't believe it. The sound of someone crying. Marcus descended into the dark, each step taking him further from safety, further from protocol, further from the world he understood. The dog waited at the bottom, silhouetted against the emergency light's dying glow. And for the first time since entering the school, Marcus understood. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was something else entirely. The 48 hours earlier, the dog had been named Rex. He belonged to the school, or rather the school belonged to him. 5 years he'd lived there, adopted by the custodian after someone left him tied to the front gate with a note that said simply, "Good boy. Can't keep, sorry." The custodian, an old man named Khalid who smelled like tobacco and kindness, had taken one look at Rex and said, "Well, I suppose someone needs to guard the children." So Rex became part of the school's ecosystem. He walked the hallways during recess, accepting pets from students who pressed their faces close to his and whispered secrets. He slept in Khalid's closet during classes, dreaming dog dreams of running and hunting. He waited by the gate every afternoon at 3:15, his tail beating a rhythm against the ground as the children poured out into the sunlight. It was a good life, simple, safe, until the first shell hit. Rex had been sleeping in the custodian's closet when the world exploded. One moment, peace. The next, a sound that wasn't a sound, a pressure that wasn't pressure, a force that picked him up and threw him against the wall like he weighed nothing. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Dust filled his mouth and nose, but his legs still worked, and his nose still functioned. And deep in his chest, in the place where instinct lived, something older than training took over. Find, protect, guard. Rex had emerged from the closet into chaos. The hallway looked wrong, twisted, broken, the ceiling sagging like an old dog's back. Emergency lights flickered, painting everything in shades of red and shadow. And the smells, burning, dust, fear, and underneath it all, the scent he'd been trained by 5 years of living to recognize. Children. The first shell had hit during the night. The school should have been empty, but Rex's nose told him a different story. Told him about the family who'd been using the basement as shelter. Told him about the pregnant mother, the 2 young children, the father who'd promised them they'd be safe here. Told him that promise had been a lie. The second shell hit while Rex was digging through the rubble. The impact threw him 10 feet, his body slamming into what used to be a classroom. When his vision cleared, he saw that the stairs to the basement had collapsed entirely, tons of concrete now sealing whatever lay beneath. Rex dug anyway. His paws bled, his claws cracked. The dust caked in his throat until every breath felt like swallowing sand. But he dug, because that's what good dogs did. They protected, they saved, they didn't abandon. Even when the building settled with groans that sounded like dying things. Even when the darkness grew so complete, he could only navigate by smell. even when he heard the crying from below grow weaker with each passing hour. By the third day, Rex had created a gap. Not large, barely big enough for him to squeeze through, but enough. He descended into the basement, into air that tasted stale and wrong, following his nose through the black. He found them in what used to be a storage room. The father was dead, had died instantly when the ceiling collapsed. The mother was trapped under a beam, her leg bent at an angle that made Rex's hackles rise. The two children huddled against her, their eyes too wide, their breath too shallow. And between them, clutched in the smallest child's arms, was a white rabbit. The girl's most treasured possession, carried down into the shelter, because if the world was ending, she wanted her rabbit with her when it happened. The mother looked at Rex with eyes that held no more hope. "Please," she whispered in a language Rex didn't understand, but recognized anyway. "Please." Rex took the rabbit gently from the child's arms. The girl cried out, reaching for it, but the mother held her back with the one arm she could still move. She understood. They all understood. Rex carried the rabbit up through the gap, through the destroyed school, out into the daylight where soldiers stood at a safe distance, documenting the damage. He needed them to understand, needed them to follow, needed them to do what he couldn't, move the beam, free the family, save what could still be saved. But the soldiers looked at him with confusion or pity or nothing at all. They didn't follow, didn't understand. One even threw him a protein bar, like that's what he needed. Like food mattered when 3 lives were slowly dying in the dark below. So Rex did the only thing he could. He went back down, and he waited for someone who would understand. Marcus stood in the basement, his helmet light painting the scene in stark whites and deep shadows. The mother's eyes found his. She didn't speak, couldn't speak maybe, or had used up all her words days ago, but her expression said everything. "Please help us, save them." The 2 children pressed against her, their faces smudged with tears and dust. The boy might have been 7. The girl couldn't have been more than 5. Both of them looked at Marcus like he was something from a story. A hero, a savior, someone who could make the nightmare end. Marcus keyed his radio with shaking hands. "Chen to command. I need immediate medical evac at my location. We have survivors. 3, maybe 4, 1 adult with crush injuries, 2 children, possible dehydration and shock." Static. Then Davies's voice tight with disbelief. "Say again, Chen, did you say survivors?" "Confirmed. I need engineers down here now. If we have a structural collapse, civilian trapped, children at risk, this is a priority rescue." More static. Then a different voice. Captain Harrison, the commanding officer, who'd declared this sector clear 3 days ago. "Chen, confirm your position. You're showing as inside the school." "Affirmative. That building's been cleared, multiple sweeps, thermal, audio, the whole package. There's nothing alive in there." Marcus looked at the mother, at the children, at Rex, who sat beside them like a guardian carved from stone. "Sir, I'm looking at them right now." A long pause. "Hold position, don't move them, we're coming to you." The wait stretched into eternity. Marcus knelt beside the family, using his knife to cut away the mother's jacket, assessing her injuries by the inadequate light of his helmet lamp. Her leg was bad, compound fracture, possibly infected. 3 days without water. The children were in better shape, but still critical. How had they survived? Marcus's light caught something in the corner, a case of bottled water, part of the school's emergency supplies. Half the bottles were empty. Near the water, he found protein bars with child-sized bite marks. The mother had rationed everything, stretching 3 days' supplies for a family of 4 into just enough to stay alive. Just barely enough. Rex hadn't left their side. Even now, with help finally arriving, he remained pressed against the children, his warmth the only comfort in the cold basement. The girl had reclaimed her rabbit, clutching it against her chest like a talisman. The boy kept one hand buried in Rex's fur, his fingers twisted tight, holding on. Sounds echoed from above. Boots, voices, the whine of cutting equipment. The rescue team was setting up. But down here in the dark, time moved differently. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like drowning. "Why didn't you signal?" Marcus asked the mother, even though he wasn't sure she spoke English. "We did sweeps, thermal imaging. You should have shown up." She managed a bitter smile. "The walls," she whispered, her accent thick. "Too much concrete, too much metal. We screamed, we pounded, no one heard. The dog, Rex, he tried to get us to follow. We didn't understand. He is a good dog." She stroked Rex's head with her free hand. "He brought water when we could not reach it, stayed with us when we wanted to give up. My daughter would not stop crying for her rabbit, and he..." She trailed off, emotion choking her words. Marcus understood. Rex had taken the rabbit because it was the only way he could communicate, the only thing he could carry that would prove someone still lived. A child's toy as evidence that children still existed in the dark. It was brilliant and heartbreaking. "You're going to be okay," Marcus said, knowing it was a lie people told in moments like this, knowing it was also what everyone needed to hear. "All of you, we're getting you out." The girl looked up at him with eyes too old for her face. "Papa?" Marcus's throat closed. He looked at the father's body, still pinned under the same beam that trapped the mother, looked at the unnatural angle of his neck, looked at the children who didn't understand yet, who thought maybe this soldier could save everyone, could make the whole nightmare rewind. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. The rescue took 4 hours. 4 hours of delicate cuts and calculated risks and moments where everyone held their breath as the building groaned and shifted. They stabilized the ceiling first, shoring up the walls, creating a path through the rubble that wouldn't collapse and kill them all. Then they worked on freeing the mother. Captain Harrison led the operation with cold efficiency, barking orders, coordinating teams, but Marcus saw the way his hands shook when he first descended into the basement, saw the way he looked at the father's body and then at his own hands, like he was trying to understand how he'd missed this, how the thermal imaging had failed, how the audio sweeps had detected nothing, how a family had suffered in the dark while soldiers stood outside and declared the building clear. They lifted the beam with hydraulic jacks, moving with agonizing slowness. The mother bit through her lip to keep from screaming, blood running down her chin. The children cried. Rex never moved from their side, his presence the one constant in the chaos. When they finally pulled her free, a medic immediately started an IV. 2 others lifted her onto a stretcher, moving with practiced speed toward the gap they'd cut in the rubble. The children followed, each carried by a soldier who held them like they were made of glass. Marcus carried Rex. The dog didn't resist, just let himself be lifted, his eyes never leaving the family. As they ascended through the ruined school, back toward daylight and safety, Marcus felt the dog's heartbeat against his chest. Fast, exhausted, but steady. They emerged into chaos. Ambulances lined the street. Medics swarmed the stretcher. Camera crews had materialized from nowhere, their lenses tracking every movement. Officers shouted orders, trying to establish a perimeter, trying to control a scene that had already spiraled beyond control. Because word had spread. A miracle. Survivors pulled from a cleared building, a family saved by a dog who wouldn't give up. The kind of story people needed right now. Marcus set Rex down, expecting the dog to bolt or collapse or do any of the things traumatized animals did after ordeals like this. Instead, Rex sat beside him, watching as the mother and children were loaded into an ambulance, watching as the doors closed, watching as the vehicle pulled away with lights flashing. Only then did he lean against Marcus's leg. Just lean, like he'd been holding himself together through sheer will, and now with his job done he could finally let go. "Sir." Captain Harrison appeared beside Marcus, his expression unreadable. "I need to understand what happened, how we missed this, how you found them." Marcus looked down at Rex. "I followed the dog." "That's it? You just followed him?" "He was carrying a toy, a child's toy. I realized what it meant." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The thermal imaging should have picked them up, even through concrete, even with interference. There's going to be an investigation. Questions, protocols that failed." He paused. "You broke direct orders entering that building." "Yes, sir." "You risked your life and potentially compromised an active operation." "Yes, sir." Harrison looked at Rex, at the blood on his paws, at the dust caked in his fur, at the eyes that had seen too much and carried too much and held too much, that humans would never fully understand. "Good work, Sergeant." Harrison's voice was rough. "Damn good work." He walked away, already speaking into his radio, coordinating the dozen things that came after a rescue. Marcus stood in the street, Rex pressed against his leg, and watched the circus unfold. Davies approached, his young face struggling between awe and confusion. "Chen, how did you know? What made you go in?" Marcus thought about all the things he could say, about instinct and training and years of experience reading situations, about the way the dog had looked at him, about the rabbit. Instead, he said, "Sometimes you just have to trust what you're seeing even when it doesn't make sense, especially when it doesn't make sense." Because sense was a luxury. Sense was something you had when you weren't standing in a war zone watching a dog save a family no one believed existed. Rex's tail thumped once against the ground, just once. Then he closed his eyes, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Marcus knelt beside him, one hand resting on the dog's head. "You did good," he whispered. "You did so damn good." The hospital was chaos. Marcus had seen combat medicine, field hospitals, emergency wards in active war zones, but this felt different, more frantic, more desperate. Like the entire medical staff had channeled all the helplessness of the past weeks into saving this one family. He stood outside the operating room, still in his dusty uniform, watching through the observation window as surgeons worked on the mother's leg. The children sat in a nearby waiting area, cleaned up now, wrapped in blankets too big for their frames. A nurse tried to coax them into eating, but they just stared at the operating room doors, waiting. Always waiting. Rex lay at Marcus's feet, refusing to leave despite multiple attempts to remove him. Hospital policy forbade animals. But hospital policy also didn't account for dogs who'd just saved 3 lives, and the staff had quickly given up, trying to enforce rules that suddenly felt meaningless. Sergeant Chen, a woman in civilian clothes, approached, her press credentials dangling from her neck. Sarah Mitchell, according to the badge. International News Network. "I was hoping we could talk about what happened today." Marcus kept his eyes on the operating room. Not interested. The public deserves to know this story. A family saved from the ruins, a hero dog who wouldn't give up. Hope in the middle of devastation. People need you to let them recover in peace. Sarah Mitchell didn't leave. "With respect, Sergeant, this story is already out there. Amateur videos, soldier reports, social media. I can help control the narrative. Make sure it's told right." Marcus finally looked at her. "Told right? You want to turn their trauma into content, their suffering into something digestible for people eating dinner in front of their TVs. That's not... There's a dead father in that school. 2 kids who'll grow up without him. A woman who might lose her leg. That's what happened today. You want to write that story?" Sarah Mitchell's expression shifted. "Yes, actually I do, because the alternative is letting this get buried under the official report. Letting it become a statistic. Mission successful, collateral acceptable, move to next sector. But this family isn't collateral. They're people. And people care about people, even when their governments try to make them forget." Marcus studied her, saw the sincerity behind the journalist facade, saw someone who maybe understood that stories mattered, that bearing witness was its own kind of duty. "Fine," he said, "but you wait until they're stable, until they can choose whether to talk, and you tell the whole story, not just the parts that make people feel good. Deal." She pulled out a notebook. "Can you at least tell me about the dog, how you knew to follow him?" Marcus looked down at Rex. The dog's eyes were open now, watching the operating room like he could will the surgeons to work faster. "I almost didn't," Marcus admitted. "I almost wrote it off as just another stray, another casualty of war. But there was something about the way he moved, the way he looked at me, like he was trying to communicate something bigger than words. And the toy rabbit? That's when I understood. Animals don't risk their lives for objects, they risk their lives for pack, for family. That rabbit meant someone was still alive, someone who needed saving." Sarah Mitchell scribbled notes. "The initial reports say your unit had cleared the building days ago. How did you miss an entire family?" The question hung heavy between them. Marcus felt the weight of it, the guilt, the knowledge that protocols had failed, that technology had failed, that human judgment had failed. "We didn't miss them," he said quietly. "The building defeated our equipment, too much interference, too much structural damage. The thermal imaging couldn't penetrate that deep. But Rex didn't need technology, he had something better." "What's that?" "He had a reason to look." The operating room doors opened. A surgeon emerged, pulling off his gloves with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. His face was unreadable. Marcus stood. Rex stood with him. "The leg?" Marcus asked. "Saved, barely. Another hour and we would have been looking at amputation. As it is, she'll need months of rehab." The surgeon looked at the children. "They can see her in 10 minutes. She's asking for them." Relief flooded through Marcus with physical force. He realized he'd been holding tension in his shoulders for hours, maybe days, maybe longer. The surgeon noticed Rex. "This the dog?" "Yeah. My daughter has his picture on her phone already. Dog Hero Saves Family. It's viral." The surgeon knelt, extending a hand for Rex to sniff. "Pretty good work for someone without opposable thumbs." Rex's tail wagged once, twice, like he understood the praise even if he didn't understand the words. What happens to him now? The surgeon asked, standing. Marcus realized he hadn't thought that far ahead. Rex had no collar, no tags. Technically, he was a stray. Military policy said strays in operational zones should be relocated or, if that wasn't possible, humanely euthanized to prevent disease spread. I'll figure something out, Marcus said. The surgeon nodded. Good, world needs more heroes, even the four-legged kind. He walked away, already moving to the next crisis, the next emergency, the next impossible decision. Sarah Mitchell was still there, watching Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. You going to keep him? Can't. Deployment regulations, logistical impossibility. Chain of command would never allow it. That's not what I asked. Marcus looked down at Rex, at the dog who'd disobeyed every animal instinct to return to a building that could have killed him, who'd carried a toy rabbit through destruction, because it was the only way to communicate what words couldn't express, who'd stayed with a dying family in the dark, because leaving them alone was unthinkable. Yeah, Marcus said, I'm keeping him. The investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of interviews and depositions and technical reviews of equipment that had failed when it mattered most. Captain Harrison spent 12-hour days in conference rooms, explaining to superiors how a family had gone undetected for 3 days, how the building's unique construction had created a perfect blind spot for thermal imaging, how the concrete and rebar had formed a Faraday cage that defeated radio signals and audio sensors, how a dog had succeeded where military technology failed. The mother, Amira, recovered slowly. The children, Rashid and Layla, recovered faster in body, if not in mind. They'd been relocated to a civilian shelter, a temporary space with too many beds and not enough privacy. Therapists visited twice a week. Social workers tried to locate extended family. The machinery of humanitarian aid ground forward with bureaucratic precision. But every day at 3 o'clock, Marcus visited with Rex. It became routine. He'd finish his duties, sign out a vehicle and drive to the shelter. The guards knew him by sight now. Didn't bother checking his papers, just waved him through with knowing smiles. Rex would bound from the truck before Marcus fully parked, racing toward the shelter's entrance, where Rashid and Layla waited. The children would shriek with joy, throwing themselves at the dog, burying their faces in his fur. For those moments, the trauma faded. For those moments, they were just kids playing with a dog. Amira would watch from her wheelchair, her legs still healing, her eyes carrying weight Marcus recognized. The weight of survival. The weight of losing someone you loved while saving those who remained. The weight of gratitude mixed with grief. You don't have to keep visiting, she told Marcus on the 15th day. You've done enough. Marcus sat beside her, watching Rex let Layla braid flowers into his fur. Rex wants to come, I'm just the chauffeur. Amira smiled. It was the first real smile Marcus had seen from her. He saved us. You know this, yes? The water was too far, I could not reach it with my leg. But Rex, he would take bottles from the case, roll them to us with his nose. We survived because of him. He's a good dog. He is more than good. He is... She searched for the English word. Miracle. He is miracle. Marcus thought about all the things that had to align for this to work. Rex being at the school, surviving the shells, finding the family, refusing to give up. Marcus following instead of dismissing. The rescue team working with perfect precision. The doctors saving Amira's leg. Every link in an impossible chain holding just long enough. Maybe, he said. What happens to him, to Rex? He's coming with me. I filed paperwork for military adoption. It's complicated, but Captain Harrison is pushing it through. Least he can do, he said, after the dog made us all look incompetent. Amira's smile faded. You take him away. To your country. Eventually, when my deployment ends, for now we stay here. And us? The question was soft, vulnerable. Where do we go? Marcus had been dreading this conversation, had been hoping someone else would handle it, some social worker or UN representative trained in delivering difficult news. But Amira deserved honesty, deserved to hear it from someone who'd been there. They're working on it. Your husband had family in Turkey, cousins, maybe an aunt. The State Department is trying to locate them. And if they cannot, then they'll find you placement somewhere safe. France, maybe, Germany, Canada, countries that take refugees. Refugees. Amira tested the word. We become refugees. We had a home. We had life. Now we are people someone must find placement for. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved us, you and Rex. Without you, we die in that basement. We die and no one ever knows. So yes, we are refugees. But we are alive refugees. This is not small thing. Rashid ran over, breathless and flushed. Mama, Rex learned a new trick, watch! He held up a ball. Rex sat immediately, eyes locked on the toy. See, he waits, he is patient dog. Very patient, Amira agreed. Rashid threw the ball. Rex exploded into motion, catching it mid-air, returning it to the boy with gentle precision. They repeated this dance a dozen times, boy and dog locked in perfect communication. He misses my daughter, Amira said quietly. Layla. Rex would stay with her always before. When she cried, he would press close. When she laughed, his tail would not stop moving. He loved her very much, Marcus understood. Dogs bond with their pack, she's his pack. Yes, so when you take him away, it will be hard. For him, for her, for all of us. Amira looked at Marcus directly. But you will give him good life, yes? You will remember that he is hero? That he saved us? I'll remember. Good. Because sometimes when thing is very dark, we forget the light that saved us. We forget that someone fought for us when they could have walked away. Rex did not walk away. You did not walk away. This is what I will teach my children. This is what they will remember. Thursday Tulchig, the award ceremony, happened on the 23rd day. Marcus hadn't wanted it. Neither had Harrison, but the brass needed good news, needed stories of success to balance against all the failures, needed something they could point to and say, see, we're making a difference. We're saving people. So they created theatre. The ceremony took place at the base, with flags and formal uniforms, and journalists granted special access. Politicians flew in for photo opportunities. Speeches were written, rehearsed, delivered with practiced sincerity. Marcus stood at attention while a general he'd never met pinned a medal to his chest. Commendation for valor, for exceptional courage under fire, for risking his life to save civilians. The words felt hollow. The medal felt like metal. But then they brought out Rex. Someone had bathed him, brushed his coat until it shined, fitted him with a ceremonial vest that said hero in bold letters. Rex tolerated this with the patience of a dog who'd endured worse. He sat beside Marcus, perfectly still, while cameras flashed and journalists shouted questions. How does it feel to be a hero, Sergeant? What made you decide to enter the building? Will Rex be staying with you permanently? What do you want people to know about what happened? Marcus answered the questions with military precision, brief, factual, revealing nothing of substance. But then someone asked, what would you say to people who think we shouldn't be here? Who think this war is pointless? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked at Rex, at Amira in her wheelchair, brought here for the ceremony, at Rashid and Layla dressed in new clothes donated by someone who'd heard their story. I'd say that family is alive because we were here, Marcus said quietly. That two kids still have their mother because we didn't look away. I can't speak to the larger questions, can't justify every decision made by people with more power than me. But I can tell you that Rex didn't care about politics or policy, or whether his actions would be interpreted as supporting one side or another. He cared about saving someone who needed saving, and sometimes that's enough, sometimes that's everything. The journalists scribbled notes. The politicians nodded with rehearsed approval. But Marcus wasn't talking to them. He was talking to the camera operators, to the translators, to everyone watching this circus from somewhere far away. He was talking to people who needed to believe that goodness still existed, that courage still mattered, that a single act of compassion could ripple outward in ways impossible to measure. After the ceremony, Amira approached with the children. Layla clutched her white rabbit, now cleaned and repaired, its missing eye replaced with a button that didn't quite match. Rashid held a drawing he'd made, Rex standing triumphant on a mountain of rubble, the sun rising behind him. For you, Rashid said, offering the picture to Marcus. So you remember. Marcus took it with hands that wanted to shake. I could never forget. Layla stepped forward. She removed a bracelet from her wrist, cheap plastic beads in bright colors, the kin of things sold by street vendors everywhere. She held it up to Rex, and the dog lowered his head with ceremonial solemnity. The girl fastened the bracelet around Rex's neck. Too loose to be a collar, too colorful to be anything but a child's treasure. So you remember us, Layla whispered. So you know we love you. Rex licked her face once, gentle. The gesture of a dog saying goodbye to pack. The girl buried her face in his fur and cried. Amira wheeled closer, her own eyes bright with tears. Rashid joined the embrace, and for a moment they were frozen there. A family and a dog holding each other in the middle of a military base, surrounded by people who didn't understand what they were witnessing. Marcus turned away, gave them privacy, gave them a moment that belonged to them alone. Captain Harrison appeared beside him. The adoption paperwork cleared. Rex is officially yours, military working dog, retired with honors. He gets full benefits, medical coverage, transport back to the States when you rotate out. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank the dog. He made this easy. Hard to deny a request from the most famous animal in the theater. Harrison paused. The family's placement came through. They have an aunt in Berlin. She's agreed to sponsor them. They leave in 2 days. 2 days, not enough time and too much time all at once. They'll be okay, Harrison continued. Counseling, education, integration support. Germany has good programs for refugees. The kids will adapt. They're young enough. And the mother. She's tougher than she looks. Survivors always are. Harrison's voice carried weight Marcus recognized. The weight of seeing too much. Of knowing that survival and living weren't always the same thing. You did good work, Chen. Saved lives. That matters. Does it? The question came out more bitter than Marcus intended. We cleared that building. Declared it safe. If I hadn't followed Rex, that family would have died and we would have moved to the next grid, never knowing. How many others did we miss? How many people are still out there waiting for someone to look harder? We can't save everyone. But we could try harder. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Yes, we could. And because of you, because of what happened, we will. New protocols, better equipment, more thorough sweeps. That family's survival means the next family has a better chance. That's what progress looks like in places like this. Incremental, bought with near misses and lucky breaks. That's not progress, that's learning from failure. Sometimes they're the same thing. Marcus watched Amira gather her children, watched them take one last look at Rex before being escorted away by handlers who'd managed their transition. Watched the dogs stand at attention, tracking their movement until they disappeared around a corner. Then, and only then, did Rex's tail droop. Did his shoulders sag? Did he become just a dog again, tired and confused, missing the family he'd saved? Come on, boy, Marcus said softly. Let's go home. Except home was a temporary barracks on a military base in a country neither of them belonged to. Home was a metal cot and regulations, and the sound of helicopters overhead. Home was something they'd both have to discover together, piece by piece, day by day. But for now they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. 3 months later, Marcus and Rex boarded a transport plane headed for the States. The deployment was over. The mission complete. The war, if it could be called a war, continued without them. New soldiers rotated in. New crises demanded attention. The world turned with mechanical indifference. Marcus had spent the final weeks training Rex for civilian life. The dog had been easy to work with, adaptable in the way of survivors. He'd learned to heal properly, to ignore distractions, to exist in a world that wasn't actively trying to kill him. But at night, Rex still dreamed. Marcus would wake to the dog whimpering, his legs twitching like he was running. Toward what or away from what, Marcus couldn't say. Maybe toward Layla, maybe toward the basement, maybe toward some threat only dogs could perceive. On those nights, Marcus would rest a hand on Rex's side, would whisper meaningless words, would stay present until the nightmares passed. They were both carrying weight, both learning to exist in a world that no longer made sense, both trying to find meaning in what they'd seen and done and failed to do. The transport plane was crowded with returning soldiers, all of them carrying their own invisible burdens. Some laughed too loud. Some didn't speak at all. All of them had the same look in their eyes, the look of people who'd left part of themselves behind and weren't sure how to retrieve it. Rex sat at Marcus's feet, wearing his plastic bead bracelet. The beads had faded, some had cracked, but Marcus had repaired them as best he could, because they were evidence. Proof that what happened had been real, that the family existed, that the miracle hadn't been a dream. Halfway through the flight, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, a video file. He opened it hesitantly. The video showed a playground in Berlin. Clean equipment, bright colors, children laughing. The camera panned across swings and slides before focusing on 2 specific children, Rashid and Layla. They were playing tag with other kids, their faces flushed with exertion, their voices carrying that particular pitch of childhood joy. Layla clutched her rabbit under one arm, refusing to be separated even during play. Rashid wore new sneakers, running with the confidence of a boy who'd forgotten to be afraid. The camera shifted. Amira stood beside a woman Marcus didn't recognize, the aunt from Berlin probably. Amira's leg had a brace, but she was standing, walking, smiling at her children with an expression that held both sorrow and hope in equal measure. The video ended. A text message followed. "They are adapting, we are grateful. Tell Rex we think of him always. Tell him we survived because of him. Tell him heroes do not need medals, they just need to be remembered. Amira." Marcus showed the video to Rex. The dog watched intently, his head tilted, his ears forward. When Layla appeared on screen, his tail wagged. Just once, but it was enough. "They're okay," Marcus whispered. "You did it. You saved them." Rex looked up at him with eyes that held depths Marcus would never fully understand. Then he laid his head on Marcus's boot and closed his eyes. Not sleeping, just resting, just existing in this moment of peace before whatever came next. The world found out about Rex in pieces. The ceremony video went viral first. 10 million views in a week. Then the journalist's story. Sarah Mitchell had kept her promise, writing a piece that balanced hope with hard truth. The family's survival, the father's death, the protocols that failed, the dog who succeeded. Then came the social media cascade. Rex's picture on t-shirts, on coffee mugs, on motivational posters with captions like "Never give up" and "Heroes have 4 paws." The image became divorced from context, transformed into something abstract and easily digestible. Marcus hated it. Hated seeing Rex's story reduced to content. Hated the comments section philosophers who thought they understood trauma because they'd watched a 3-minute video. But he understood it too. Understood that people needed symbols. Needed to believe that goodness existed. That courage could triumph, that a single dog could make a difference in a world that seemed determined to break everything beautiful. Marcus returned to his hometown, a small city in Oregon where the coffee was good and people mostly left you alone. He rented an apartment with a yard, found work as a contractor, built a life that was quiet and simple and fundamentally insufficient because the war followed him home, not in flashbacks or nightmares or the dramatic ways movies portrayed trauma. It followed him in subtler ways, in the way he checked exits in every room, in the way loud noises made his shoulders tense, in the way he'd catch himself listening for sounds that didn't exist here, shells, helicopters, the particular silence that came before violence. Rex understood. Rex had his own ghosts, would sometimes stare at doorways like he expected someone to emerge, would press close to Marcus during thunderstorms, seeking comfort from sounds that echoed too closely to artillery. They healed together, slowly, in fragments. Marcus started volunteering at a veterans center, helping other soldiers navigate the impossible transition from war to peace. Rex became a therapy dog, officially certified, visiting hospitals and schools, and anywhere people needed the particular comfort that animals provided. Children especially loved Rex, would sit beside him whispering secrets, finding in his quiet presence something they couldn't articulate. Marcus watched these interactions with mixed emotions. Gratitude that Rex could help others, grief for everything the dog had endured to develop this capacity for empathy. One afternoon, 6 months after returning home, Marcus received an email from Berlin from Amira. She'd attached new pictures. Rashid playing soccer, Layla in a school play dressed as a flower, her white rabbit watching from the audience, Amira standing without the brace, walking unaided, her smile genuine. The email was short. "We grow, we heal, we remember. Always remember. Your friend Amira." Marcus printed the pictures, hung them on his refrigerator beside Rex's adoption papers and the drawing Rashid had made. Evidence, proof, memory. That night, Marcus sat in his backyard with Rex beside him, watching the sun set over houses and streets, and a world that felt impossibly far from bombed-out schools and desperate families. A world that continued to spin despite everything, because of everything. "You know what I learned?" Marcus said to Rex. The dog's ear twitched. "I learned that being a hero isn't about the big moments, it's about showing up, about refusing to walk away when it would be easier, about carrying toy rabbits through destroyed buildings, because it's the only language you have." Rex's tail thumped against the ground. "You didn't save that family because of training or instinct or anything complicated. You saved them because you decided their lives mattered. Because you made a choice every day, every hour to not give up. That's what makes someone a hero, not the medal, not the ceremony, the choice." Marcus scratched behind Rex's ears. "And you chose right. You saved 3 lives, maybe 4 if you count the father's memory living on through his kids. Maybe more if you count everyone who heard the story and decided to try harder, to look deeper, to believe that impossible things can still happen. The sun touched the horizon, painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. "I don't know if you understand any of this," Marcus continued. "Don't know if dogs think about meaning or legacy or whether their actions matter, but I need you to know—" His voice broke. He stopped, breathed, started again. "I need you to know that you changed everything. Not just for that family, for me, for everyone who was there. You reminded us why we started, why we stay, why we keep trying even when everything feels hopeless." Rex looked up at Marcus, those deep, knowing eyes. That expression that spoke of understanding beyond words. Then he licked Marcus's hand. Once, simple. The gesture of a dog offering comfort to the human who needed it. They sat together as darkness fell. Man and dog, soldier and hero. Two survivors learning to exist in a world that hadn't ended, that demanded they figure out how to live and not just survive. Above them, stars appeared. Indifferent, eternal, bearing witness to all the small acts of courage that happened beneath their light, all the choices made in darkness, all the lives saved and lost and changed forever. In Berlin, 2 children slept safely. In Oregon, a dog rested beside his human. In the space between, a story lived. Not the sanitized version, not the viral video, not the medal ceremony, the real story, the hard story. The story of a family dying in the dark, and a dog who decided their survival mattered more than his safety. The story of soldiers who almost failed and barely succeeded. The story of broken things that found a way to hold together just long enough. The story of hope purchased at terrible cost and held onto with desperate determination. Because in the end, that's what all stories are. Fragments of light preserved against the dark. Evidence that goodness existed. That courage mattered. That someone somewhere decided to fight for something bigger than themselves. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. You are human. You are reading this now, and you carry your own weight. Maybe it's not a destroyed school or a trapped family or a war-torn country. Maybe it's something smaller, something private, something that hurts in ways you can't always articulate. But the lesson remains. Heroes aren't born, they're forged in moments of choice. When walking away would be easier. When no one would blame you for protecting yourself first. When the darkness seems too deep and the odds too long. That's when heroes emerge. Not because they're stronger or braver or more capable, but because they choose to show up. Choose to try. Choose to believe that one person, one dog can make a difference, even when all evidence suggests otherwise. Rex didn't save that family because he was special. He saved them because he decided they were worth saving. Because he refused to accept their deaths as inevitable. Because he kept trying when everything said trying was pointless. You have that same choice. Every day, in ways big and small, the person sitting alone who needs company. The injustice you could speak against. The small act of kindness that seems too insignificant to matter. The truth you could tell when lying would be easier. These are the moments that define us, not the medal ceremonies, not the viral videos, the quiet decisions made when no one's watching, the times we choose courage over comfort, connection over isolation, hope over despair. Rex carried a toy rabbit through a destroyed school because it was the only way he knew to communicate. Someone still lives. Someone still matters. Someone is worth the risk. What are you carrying? What message are you sending to a world that's watching whether you realize it or not? Because here's the truth they don't tell you. You are someone's miracle. You are someone's last hope. You are the person who could make the difference between survival and surrender. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, not when circumstances align perfectly. Now, today, in this moment. The family didn't know Rex would save them. Rex didn't know if anyone would understand. Marcus didn't know if entering that building would matter, but they all chose to try anyway. And 3 lives were saved. A story was told. A reminder was sent across borders and languages and circumstances. Love wins. Courage matters. Choosing to care is never wasted. So when you face your own destroyed buildings, your own moments of impossible choice, remember the dog who wouldn't quit. Remember the soldier who followed. Remember the family who survived, because someone decided their lives were worth the risk. Then ask yourself, what am I willing to risk? Who am I willing to fight for? What impossible thing am I willing to attempt? Because the world needs your version of carrying rabbits through ruins. Needs your specific courage, your particular compassion. Your unique choice to show up when showing up feels impossible. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on 4 paws. Sometimes they look exactly like you. The question isn't whether you're capable of heroism. The question is, will you choose it?